I myself have been decidedly more critical of the so-called Fandom Menace people because I usually don't find them very reliable. But Gary from Erotic is a bit of an exception. He's a little bit more serious. He does his research and he knows his comic books. And he's done some good stuff. He called out D&D far before most people did on Game of Thrones. So here we're going to concentrate on his analysis on the MCU. And I usually am very skeptical when they get into this apocalyptic mode that this thing is in trouble or that thing's going to be destroyed or et cetera, et cetera. But this time I think Gary is actually onto something and that the MCU is kind of in danger of destroying itself. Now, I want to be careful. I don't mean that in the full sense. If you care about the characters, which I don't, because I don't like many of them because they're too far from the comic book source, or if you like a lot of the stories, which I'm more mixed on, I do think some of the stories are good, but a lot of them are kind of disappointing to me, then there is some room for concern here, at least in a literal sense, because apparently we're not going to have much of the MCU going forward because a lot of stuff will not be in the theaters, but they're going to start streaming most of the content. And Gary is going to let us know why this is so and the kind of very profit-minded reasons for it.
Access on July 9th. Now, I don't know what Premier Access is. Do you have to pay extra? They will also be doing the same for Cruella on May 28th. Marvel Studios' official Twitter stated, Black Widow in theaters July 9th and on Disney Plus with Premier Access. Additional fees required. That answers my question. Poor Disney. While Disney hasn't confirmed what the Premier Access price tag will be, previous films such as Raya and the Last Dragon, Mulan, which as you know was filmed right next to a camp that you concentrate in, and then they thanked the people who ran that camp that you concentrate in, had price tags of $29.99 on top of Disney Plus subscription fees, which is at a minimum of $6.99 per month. You are able to purchase it annually for $69.99 per year. Disney describes its Premier Access as an opportunity to watch as many times as you want on any platform where Disney Plus is available. Oh, thanks. Well, I'll be happy to miss it because I am not subscribed.
All right, so good news and bad news is that Kevin Feige, who I'm much more critical of, if you know me on Twitter, I've been very harsh on him and his alleged godlike status among a lot of the fandom. And let me put myself out there and dredge up the quote, which I used. And yeah, it's pretty harsh, but unfortunately, I don't think I'm unjustified in saying that Kevin really doesn't know the comic books or really knows these characters. But so what? He's made a ton of money. But I would give him this, that at least at the cinematic level, he was very dedicated to making sure these things were theatrically released and worked as films. But in terms of, let's just do his Spider-Man thing and get on to the bigger problems. So his whole idea with Spider-Man apparently is that we need to see him as more bright and optimistic, which, if you know at least the 1980s, 1990s Spider-Man, does not make any sense at all. The prime characteristic of Spider-Man is that he's always in danger. He's always dealing with problems. He's always angst-ridden. If you get rid of that part of the character, you don't have Spider-Man. You have something else. You have somebody with a costume, but you don't have Spider-Man. So I'm really stunned he would say that publicly, but he did. And going forward, you can already see a lot of warning signs. Because, okay, let's get to some of the good news. They have committed to Black Widow, which is going to come out. Unfortunately, the screenwriter for Black Widow is a total idiot, so that's going to be kind of alarming. On the other hand, they also have Moon Knight. They're promising that they're going to do Moon Knight, and that's intriguing. But they're already giving you a lot of signs that they're really going to change course, and not in a good way. So finally, Deadpool also is coming, and it is going to be R-rated. But Blade is coming, and they've said very clearly that will not be R-rated, even though the essence of that character is to be a very explicit R-rated character. So you're like, all right, that doesn't make any sense at all. Why are you doing it that way? And as Gary notes, you can kind of see through their language that they're basically, the so-called hybrid strategy is the things that are not going to make $1 billion, they're not going to release theatrically, and the things that are going to be making more money for them on TV, they're going to put more on TV. Which itself would not be alarming, but I'm not a big fan of WandaVision, and compared to The Mandalorian, it's just mush. It's just not comparing at all to the fun excitement of The Mandalorian. And Season 2 had a lot of bumps, I'd have to admit. But if I had to be really harsh, The Mandalorian is kind of like warm tea with a big kind of bagel or donut. But WandaVision was just mushy and silly and stupid and failed to have a really great dramatical payoff. And when they did do the payoff, it didn't even make sense in terms of the characters. So it's sort of it was just really, for me, an annoying, just I just did not like going through it. But I'll try to give it another try and go through the clips because there is some intriguing angle. Which brings us to, again, and despite what people think, this is actually me being neutral. I'm not actually trying to be nice on both sides. Is that the showrunner for WandaVision really has some devastating confessions that she really doesn't know comic books and she really doesn't know the characters. And she doesn't care either. So if they're going to do more and more stuff on television and they're going to be hiring more and more people who don't even care about the comics or don't even know the Marvel Universe, you're kind of like, where is this going exactly? So the good half is we are finally going to get Black Widow. We're also finally going to get, apparently, the Eternals this year. And that's about it. The really good stuff is going to come out next year with Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy, but they're already changing the characters. Like, oh, apparently now Star-Lord is a bisexual, and they're just doing all these little tiny things. Right now, the form is going to be Thor and things like that. And you're like, what does any of this have to do with anything? It just feels like they're really drying up creatively, and they don't have access to the major characters anymore because most of the actors have retired, right? Captain America and Tony and some of the bigger, greater characters, and so they've just got left. Captain Marvel, really? That's really their biggest now, most popular character that they have. Yeah, it looks kind of like a mess. Now, part of this is not their fault. They didn't anticipate the virus, but only seen a little parts of Winter Soldier and Falcon, and I am not excited at all. And apparently it's going to be an extremely short series too. It's just going to be like about 6 episodes. Not off to a great start in terms of the new phase, but I never bought the phase nonsense. I never bought that Kevin has this master plan or anything like that. But we're definitely getting into the weak part of the MCU, which is fine. It's not that I'm a DC fanboy at all. Actually, I began more with Marvel than anything else. But I have to say, more and more, I'm interested, even where it's failing with the DCEU and how it potentially is going in interesting directions with its own different creators and different forms of the universe. But this feels like a schlop. It just feels like very sloppy and very hesitant. And I'm not even sure that they're even going to stick to this date or they're even going to stick to the theatrical release. But it's good that we're finally going to get Black Widow. But given who the writer is, I'm very, very nervous about what we're really going to get, not just from her, but from the MCU going forward. It just seems like we're not even going to get the MCU. It's not going to be even cinematic. It's going to be some multimedia nonsense, and the multimedia so far is very disappointing. All right, this has been an update on the MCU, or what the MCU probably will be in the near future. Thanks for listening.